Hi there and welcome back to 355 Code. Today we will be beginning our paint clone tutorial. This is going to take several videos, so please make sure that you subscribe to our channel and follow along for future installments of this tutorial. And basically what we're going to try and do over the course of this tutorial is create our own paint. If you're familiar with the computer application Paint, where you can draw and make shapes and stuff like that. And we're going to be making it pretty much purely in JavaScript. To begin with, you're going to need a little bit of HTML to get started. If you're not familiar with HTML at all, I will be sharing this code pen in the description, and you can basically just copy the HTML that I have over here. And it's a very simple HTML boilerplate code, and really all I added here is a canvas. And canvas is what we are going to be using to set up our Paint application. And if you're not familiar with Canvas at all, you might want to check out our other intro videos or just do a quick read in the documentation. But basically, Canvas is something that will allow us to draw using and create shapes and pictures using JavaScript. So I've added here a canvas. I've called it canvas. The idea is canvas, and the width and height is 500 pixels each. We might play around with that later on in the tutorial, but this should be enough to get us started. So now let's head over to the JavaScript. We will not be needing any CSS, so I'm just going to minimize the CSS editor. And we really don't need to touch our HTML anymore, so for now I'm going to minimize it as well. So basically we have our JavaScript and we have our website here below. And before we get started, I should really tell you that one of my goals with this tutorial is to really give you the full coding experience. So I really want you to meet the challenges together with me, and I won't be hiding anything about the process and struggles that I go through and bugs that we encounter, and how we kind of just break through them and work through them. So to get started with, we really need to just declare our canvas in JavaScript, and we're going to be doing that using getElementById, and that's really how we can kind of interact with HTML elements using JavaScript. If what I'm saying doesn't make any sense to you, you can really just copy the first few lines of code from this code pen. So equals, we're going to call this constant canvas, and this will equal to document. I'm not going to go into what document means and what getElementById means here, because that's not the main goal of this tutorial. It's mostly to experiment with the canvas feature and canvas. Okay, so basically what we did here is we declared a variable in JavaScript, and we told JavaScript that this variable is the element in HTML that had the ID of canvas. If you remember, that's the ID that we gave our canvas element in JavaScript. And now basically we can execute functions, etc., and access this canvas. The next thing that we're going to want to do is we are going to want to get the context of this canvas. This is a technicality of the canvas feature, so we're just going to call this context, CTX, and this will be equal to canvas get context, and here we're going to write 2D, okay, because we are basically, you could think of this as basically creating the canvas, and we're going to be using a 2D canvas. There are other options for different, more complex 3D canvases, but basically we're going to be creating a very simple Paint application, and for that we just need 2D. So basically in this line, what we did is we told our JavaScript that this new variable, CTX, is going to be a 2D canvas. Let's call this something else. Let's call this paintboard. Okay, just because CTX is a little bit hard to say over and over, so let's call this paintboard. And the next thing that we're going to do is to really just test this out to see that everything is working. So the way we'll do that is by creating a rectangle on our canvas. And in order to do that, we need to do two things. The first thing we have to do is declare a fill style, and that we do by doing paintboard dot fill style and then just equals a certain color. So let's just pick blue. You can also use the hex colors or the red, green, blue colors here, but just for simplicity's sake, we'll use a color that JavaScript recognizes. And all of this information I'm just getting from the documentation. So I'll add that in the link below. And if you read through it, it's really quite simple. And the next thing we're going to do is to actually create a rectangle. And we do that with a function called fillRect. So that will be paintboard fillRect. And basically what we need to tell the canvas here is where we want this rectangle to start. So let's say we want it to start at the top left pixel of the canvas. So that would be 0, 0. And now we also want to tell it how many pixels high and how many pixels wide. So let's just declare a 100 by 100 rectangle. Okay, and now as soon as I am done here, you see our rectangle appear. And you see that it's not really starting at the edges because the body itself of our HTML has margins, and we're going to be needing to deal with that later. But for now, for our purpose, it's sufficient. And I'm just going to play around a bit with this rectangle so you can see how the fill rectangle kind of changes based on the information that I put in here, because this will be important for us to understand how to use the canvas later on. So let's say I tell it to start at 1050, and you can see that it really moved 50 pixels down and 10 pixels to the right. And let's say I make this into 200 instead of 100. Now you can see that the width has changed to 200 pixels. So it's really kind of start left, start top, and then width and height. I'm just kind of writing in our understanding. This start left can also be, let's say, X, and this start top we can also understand as Y. Okay, great. So we got our first rectangle in there, and basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this rectangle so that it basically fills our entire canvas. And this is going to be kind of the backdrop for our drawing function. Okay, the first thing that we're going to want to make in our paint clone is the ability to draw, right? What's draw? Basically, when I click and drag with my mouse, I want that to draw a line where I pull my mouse. Okay, so there's a few steps that we have to go through in order to get to that point. And the first step that we're going to have to do is basically to know when I'm clicking and where I clicked. So in order to do that, we're going to have to add an event listener. And again, I'm not going to be going into event listeners in this tutorial. If you need to read up on it or learn more, then you can do that separately. I'm assuming that you have a basic understanding of accessing the DOM using JavaScript. And again, if there are certain parts you don't understand, you can just copy my code for those parts and code out the parts that you do understand. So we're going to add an event listener to our paint board. Okay, so that will be paint board add event listener. And the event that we're going to be listening for, so this could really either be click or mouse down. Because we're going to be using the other mouse event listeners, we will just use mouse down here. And basically that tells it, canvas, listen to hear if there is ever a mouse down, which is basically a click, in the area of the canvas. And when there is that event, we're going to execute a function. And it's going to listen for the event, which is basically the thing that happened. And basically what we're going to want to do is pick up what the X and Y of the mouse was when we clicked. And we're going to be using that information later on. So let's declare two new variables. So we're going to let click X equal to event dot client X. So client X is basically just a way to access the X coordinate of the event that took place, where here it's a mouse down. And we are going to also declare click Y as event dot client Y. And now we're going to just console log click X and click Y and see if that works. And it's really important to just keep on checking your code as you're coding so that we don't get really far and code a lot and then realize, oh wait, there's a fundamental problem with what we've been doing until now. We really want to keep on testing and correcting bugs as we code. So let's check our console. And there seems to be a problem here. Let's see. Let's try clicking. Okay, so paintboard.addEventListener is not a function. Okay, so let's see where we have made a mistake. Okay, so here's where we made the mistake. So basically we added the event listener to paintboard, where actually what we wanted to do is add the event listener to canvas, because canvas is our element inside of the HTML. Paintboard is just a certain secondary thing that we declared in order to use the canvas within JavaScript. But event listeners need to be added to the elements in HTML themselves. So now I've corrected that, and now let's see if this has started to work, and we see that it has. So each time that I click, you can see here on the bottom in the console, I'm getting the X and Y coordinates for my click. So the next thing that we want to do is to basically draw when I click now. That'll be the next step. So basically what we want to do is to fill a rectangle, right? If you remember what we used from up here, so we get paintboard dot fill a rectangle, and the place that we want this rectangle to start is the X and Y that we got from the event. So here we're going to write start left X. So the first thing that we want is the X. So click X and then click Y. And let's make this a 3 by 3 rectangle just so we can really see it. So now we'll see that when I click, nothing happens. And why does nothing happen? Because we did not declare a fill style. And this is real life, people. So this is what's going to happen to you when you're coding too, and that is completely normal. So fill style, and let's make it black so we can really see it stand out on the blue. Let's test out our code again. And you can see that wherever I click, a black rectangle appears. It's at a slight stray from the mouse itself, and that really has to do with the margin that we have here around the board, and that basically the coordinates are relative to one of the coordinates is relative to the canvas that we have here in the rectangle, and some of the coordinates are relative to the entire website. So we're going to work that out later on because at the moment it's not so critical that we have a slight kind of stray and it's a few pixels off. You could also solve it. You could solve it simply by getting rid of the margins on the body, but we want to kind of think of a more clever solution in the future because we might want our canvas to only be part of our entire website, and we'll really need a more clever solution for that later on. So let's continue. So basically what we got now is we can create lots of little dots. But what we want to do is actually continue drawing as our mouse is pressed down. So one thing that we can do is use the mouse move event listener and basically tell the JavaScript that we want to create one of these rectangles whenever the mouse moves. So let's try basically copying the code that we have here. And we're just going to change this to mouse move. And now, okay, you can see that we are creating dots whenever the mouse moves. So this is a bit of a problem for us because we only want to create the dots when we are clicking and dragging. And in order to do that, we're basically going to need to figure out what state we're in. If we're in a state that the mouse is down or the mouse is up. And we're going to do that by using a variable. So let's declare a variable here, and we're going to call it, let's say, mouse down, okay, with a capital B, not to get confused with our event listener. And it's going to be equal to false to begin with. And what we're going to do is when we have our mouse down event, we are going to change this variable to true, okay? And basically say, okay, now mouse is down. And then within our mouse move, we're going to add a condition. So we're going to say if mouse down, okay, and this basically is the same as saying if mouse down equals true. Okay, so if mouse down, then do all of this. So basically this mouse move function will only happen when mouse down is equal to true. So you see if I put my mouse now over the canvas, we don't see the dots. But if I click and then I move, then the dots come. But we have a problem because we cannot stop the dots. No matter how much I click, and I'm not even clicking now, and it's just moving. So basically what we need to do is to tell the computer when we are not in the mouse down anymore. And we're going to do that by adding another event listener, which is mouse up. So let's add that over here. So canvas.add event listener, and we're going to call this mouse up. And the function will be very simple. It'll listen for the event. We don't even really need to listen for the event here, but what we're going to do is make mouse down equal false. Okay, and now what that means is that as soon as our mouse comes up, mouse down will equal false, and then we should not be drawing anymore. So let's really test that out. So now I click and I try to move the mouse, nothing happens because I'm not dragging. So that's good. And now let's click and drag, and we get our dots. And I let go, no more dots. So now we have basically completed our very, very simple draw function in JavaScript. Okay, so you basically have a Paint application here, a Paint clone, or at least the most basic draw function of Paint. But we have one little problem that we should probably work out before we finish for today. And that is that we are basically creating lots of little dots, and we are not really creating a nice, coherent line that we would want to create in a Paint application. So the way that we're going to do that is by using another function of Canvas, which is not the fill rectangle, but which is the line 2. And basically what we are going to want to do is instead of fill rectangles, let's comment that out. I always prefer commenting out because I never know when I'm going to really need that piece of code later on. Maybe what I'm trying now is not going to work. So I prefer commenting out until I get a nice working piece of code, and then I can erase things that I don't really need anymore. And basically, we're going to use the line 2. So the line 2 needs to have a starting point, which is going to be probably 0, 0 if you don't declare anything else. But there's a very simple way to tell the JavaScript where the starting point is, and that is by using the move to function. So basically, we're going to do paintboard move to, and the starting point for our lines is going to be our click X, click Y. Okay, and that's basically where we want to start our line. And then we're going to want to draw a line. So paint board dot line 2. And also we're going to use click X, click Y. And in order to make our, oops, I see already a typo here. That would have been annoying later on. And that basically tells the JavaScript, okay, we want to start our line here, we want to end our line here, and we want to, what kind of line do we want to? We're going to use something called stroke. So there's fill and stroke. So fill will kind of fill an area, so that'll be helpful later on when we want to create shapes and stuff like that. But since we're doing just lines now, the stroke will work better. And let's see what happens now. Okay, so I tried to draw, and nothing is happening. We've actually moved backwards. Okay, and the reason for this is that basically our move to and our line to are in the same place. So we're just getting kind of the rectangles from the click down. You can see that kind of if I comment this out, we won't be even getting anything at all. And the solution for this is that basically what we want to do is we want to actually draw the line before we move. Okay, so we're going to cut this out and we're going to move this sorry, we're going to move this. Okay, it needs to be under the click X, click Y. And then now let me explain what's happening here in the function. So basically, we click. I know it's called click X, but it's not really click anymore. It's really move. And so every time we move our mouse, we're getting the X and Y coordinates of the place our mouse is. We're drawing a line to it from the previous X and Y. And then we're declaring that the new starting point is where we ended up. So this should create a pretty continuous line for us. And let's check that out. And nothing is happening. So let's take a look at code and see what is wrong. And you can see that I have declared the fill style after the line to. So basically, the line to does not know what the fill style is. Same problem as before. And let's try this again. And still nothing. So let's take a look at our code again and see where we might have gotten this wrong. Okay, so my hunch is that the first time that we're running this mouse move function, we don't actually have a starting location because you see we call the move to only afterwards. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this move to and I'm going to add it to our mouse down function, which should always happen before the mouse move, at least in the situation that we actually want to draw. And this we're going to leave commented out. And basically all I'm going to do is to declare or call mouse move right here at the end. Okay, we don't really need a console anymore. And now let's see if that has solved our problem. And it still has not solved our problem. So let's take a look at this again. So for your sake, I had paused the video briefly while I searched for the problem. And after about 5 or 10 minutes of looking through my code again and again, I realized that I did not put the parentheses after the stroke function. And it's usually things that go like that will kill you, and not your lack of understanding of JavaScript and whatnot. So let's try our paint board one last time. And now we see that we have a beautiful drawing function. So this is really, in about 15-20 minutes, we managed to create a very basic Paint clone, which has the most important functionality of Paint, which is drawing. And in the next part of the tutorial, we will experiment with adding more functionality. For example, clearing the board, eraser, different thicknesses, different shapes, etc. So we can really add a lot of nice functionality to our Paint clone. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope it explained a little bit more about the very powerful tool that is Canvas in HTML and JavaScript. And if you like this video, please give us a like, comment with different things that you would like to add to the Paint clone, and we can add that to future installments of the tutorial. And make sure to subscribe and follow along. So see you next time.